welcome to my channel. My name is Sarah Lipkowitz and I'm a real estate agent based in Montgomery County, Maryland. I specialize in homes and farms in Maryland and Virginia, and today I want to talk about a topic that my followers have been asking me to make a video on for quite some time, and that is easements in the state of Maryland. The first thing that you need to know about easements is that they are typically in perpetuity. They run with the deed and they transfer to every new owner. So typically it is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to get rid of an easement. However, there are exceptions. So an easement could be something very simple, like a shared driveway. So if you have a neighbor whose property doesn't have direct access to a road, there may be an easement running through your property that allows them access to theirs. And if at some point in the future things change and they have direct access to a road, you may be able to get rid of that easement because it's no longer necessary. The other thing that is really important to know about easements is that there are a lot of different types of easements. So there are statewide programs, but there are also county-specific programs. And as a seller, you want to make sure you're disclosing when there's an easement because we want to make sure we're marketing the property properly. And as a buyer, you want to make sure you have an understanding of whether or not there are easements on the property before you write that offer. I'm typically, again, on either side of the transaction, pulling the deed, checking with the county, because, for instance, if you're a farm buyer and you want to keep horses and there's a forest conservation easement on the property, you can't do that. So very, very important before you buy, before you sell, to make sure you are figuring out what kind of easements you're dealing with, and as a seller that you're disclosing them. So there are two types of easements that we encounter most frequently in Maryland, and the first kind is forest conservation easements, which are typically very, very restrictive. They can vary a bit by county, but they are statewide. They are everywhere, and it's something that's really important to know about because it affects your ability to subdivide. If you have horses, like a lot of my buyers do, it affects your ability to keep grazing animals on that acreage. So, very important to know if there's a forest conservation easement. I've had a number of situations where a buyer was interested in a property and then we looked it up, found out there was a forest conservation easement on the property, and it just wouldn't have made it workable for them. So this is something that's super important to know about. And it may not be the whole property. Sometimes it's just a part of the property. Sometimes it's half the property. Sometimes there's a cutout for you to be able to build one home. But typically with forest conservation easements, it's not that you can't just cut down trees. I mean, that's a part of it. But you also can't disturb new growth. So anything you would do that would disturb new growth in the forest is against the rules. And again, these are in perpetuity. You're not getting rid of this type of easement. You're really not. The other type of easement that we come across a lot is a statewide program called the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation. And this could be farmland or forest land. So it's really important, again, to look up the deed and look up the documents and get an understanding of what the easement is for. But again, here you're selling your rights to subdivide, essentially. You are selling land into the easement. So you still own the property, but you are selling your right to subdivide. And the reason a lot of sellers do this, I get this question a lot, why would somebody choose to do that? Well, you get paid per acre based on market value. So for the Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, you get a fair market value. So what a subdivider would pay for the property, subtract from that what a farmer might pay, and that is what the state will pay you. If it is found that you actually sold into the easement for less than market value, you'd get tax benefits. And that's the other thing. So you're getting paid per acre for a lot of these easements, both from the county specifically or from the state, depending on what type of easement it is, but oftentimes you're also getting tax benefits. So that's why people do it, and beyond just, having a care for conservation in general. And again, where it affects my clients. As a seller, you need to know this so you can market your property properly. And not every seller does know it, because if you're not the seller that put it in conservation and you didn't have an agent and a title company that made it very clear to you, you may not know if you're in conservation or not. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. And so it's very important as a seller to just, as a listing agent, we're pulling the deed, we're double checking, making sure that we understand if there are restrictions on the property and what those are. As a buyer, again, very, very important to understand what the statewide easements might be, and then also what the county specific easement might be on the property. And again, very simple. You pull the deed, it's public record. You can pull the deed and check on the documents. If you are considering selling some acreage into an easement, something that I would suggest considering is setting aside a few acres to build on. So if you ever wanted to build a second house, or you ever wanted to sell off a little bit of a parcel, that you might have the option to do that. I think sometimes people put their entire property into an easement and then they realize they've kind of backed themselves into a corner 10 years down the line. So, obviously the goal of these easements is conservation, is preservation, and it is to, prevent subdivision from kind of taking over the world. But it may pay to just keep a couple acres out of the easement just in case you need them for whatever reason. You could always change your mind in the future, I suppose, but that's something that I have found a lot of buyers and sellers wish that they saw on a property. We look at a property that's mostly in conservation easement with a buyer, and they could make it work if there were just 2 or 3 acres open for them to build a second house for a family member or something to that effect. So something to keep in mind if you are interested in selling land into an easement. The other thing to keep in mind is that some of these easements have really high demand. So there is not necessarily the same amount of money being thrown at property owners depending on what the easement is. So for like the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, they have really high application numbers. So that can affect funding year to year, and that's just something to keep in mind. This topic is really a multi-video topic. I think we're gonna have to make different videos on specific easements just to go a little bit more in depth, but what I will do is put some links below so you can check out some different types of easements in the state of Maryland, and I'll also put a link to the website where you can make an account and access public records, so you can access deeds to check for yourself. But I think if you're buying a property, having an agent who does this type of groundwork for you is very, very important. And if you're selling a property, having a listing agent who knows to ask is also very, very important. Thank you for watching. I really hope you found this video helpful and that you'll remember to like and subscribe.